At 6:11 in the morning over the southeastern sky of Kupiansk, the Su-34 cockpit shuddered lightly, as if slipping into a compressed pressure layer. On the MFD, a string of FAB-500 M62 UMPKs released from the racks and stretched into a straight band of signals dropping toward the Ukrainian defensive line. Below, target designation nodes lit up simultaneously. GLONASS held coordinates steady enough for the Russian pilot to trust that by simply following the procedure, the entire forward trench system would be wiped clean within a few tens of seconds. They did not know that exactly 40 seconds later, in a scenario Ukraine had prepared to exploit that guidance chain, the entire UMPK salvo would begin drifting off its original flight path, opening chaos not on the front line, but deep in the Russian rear behind Kupiansk. On the operational map, Kupiansk was no longer a town, but the lock point of the entire Russian axis of advance, a railroad junction, and the only bridge crossing the west bank of the Oskil River. For weeks, Russia had used guided glide bombs, from FAB UMPK to other KAB variants, to grind down Ukrainian trenches, artillery crews, and radar sites, forming an almost fixed attack pattern, Su-34s punching through cloud cover, releasing loads from 40 to 60 kilometers, then letting the UMPK glide wings steer themselves onto target. On the 7th of December, 2025 alone, a Russian glide bomb struck the village of Kurilivka in Kupiansk district, wounding 2 civilians. Another example of how Russian air power was using glide bombs to force the entire region into exhaustion slowly. For Ukraine, that procedure was no longer secret. In an underground operations room, UAV feeds, satellite imagery, and jamming data were fused into a single map layer, revealing that Russian ground nodes always activated in the same rhythm before every FAB drop. Target designation stations, data relay vehicles, reinforced GLONASS antennas. In the counter-strike scenario built from that very data, Ukraine knew it could not stop every bomb, but it could cut into the guidance system. And once that chain broke, the entire UMPK trajectory would turn, not toward Ukrainian lines, but straight into Russian rear areas long considered absolutely safe. At an altitude above 10,000 meters, a pair of Su-34s pierced the clouds, fuselages trembling as they locked into the pre-calculated bomb release corridor. On the MFD, the flight path hugged the axis, speed held nominal. The GLONASS channel stayed solid green. The ground data link showed no flicker. Beneath the wings, more than a dozen FAB-500 M62s fitted with UMPK had dropped away, each carrying nearly half a ton of explosives, the whole salvo over 5 tons, only a few enough to erase a field base or cripple a logistics yard in an instant. 6:13. In the Russian command bunker, the digital map expanded like a sheet of glass. At the southeastern forest edge of Kupiansk, target designation nodes lit up in rhythm. Electro-optical reconnaissance, communications antennas, data relay vehicles, GLONASS boost clusters. At mid-altitude, a Mi-8 carrying a jamming pod orbited, blanketing every approach angle. The kill chain ran so smoothly that internal comms had narrowed to short confirmation calls, and that very moment of perfection compressed all guidance into a single centralized structure, just as the ground beneath began to move. Directly beneath the bomb release corridor, at exactly the 12th second after the FAB UMPK salvo left the racks, the Ukrainian ground stirred lightly, as if a current of air had been forced up from beneath the grass. Not artillery, not air defense missiles, but small UAVs, concealed entirely within earthen mounds. Dozens of rotors spun up almost simultaneously, producing a thin, sharp sound, too low for Russian radar to resolve, yet clear enough to mark the opening of a strike conducted at ground-hugging altitude. From afar, they were little more than wind-tossed specks. But at 5 to 10 meters above ground, each UAV clung to the terrain like an electronic probe, threading paths the Russian system never anticipated. Field edges, drainage ditches, forest margins, terrain bands that masked most of the ground radar's viewing angles. The UAV cameras tilted slightly as they dodged a power pole, skimmed over an embankment, then dropped lower as they entered zones where Russian guidance nodes had ramped to full power only seconds earlier. Inside the Ukrainian operations bunker, 3 low-altitude tracks appeared on the screen as 3 distinct signal bands. One headed toward the target designation and ranging radar cluster, where upright antennas were holding the coordinate grid for the FAB salvo. The second curved toward the reinforced GLONASS relay cluster, the mandatory transit point for every data packet sent to the Su-34. The third pressed tight against the area housing electronic warfare vehicles and the forward C2 node, the broadcast center of the entire kill chain. In the first corridor, the FPV camera shook slightly as the UAV slipped free of the last canopy of leaves. The target designation antenna rose in the infrared image, bright and clear like a technical hotspot. The UAV dipped its nose and drove straight into the antenna base. A small flash flared, and the entire designation cluster dropped into darkness. On the Su-34, coordinate data lagged for only an instant, still not enough to trigger any warning. The second UAV curved down behind the relay vehicle's roof. It slipped precisely into a blind zone outside the surveillance camera's coverage, then struck the transmission assembly head-on. A brief spark burst out, the equipment went dead, and the reinforced GLONASS channel vanished from the Russian network. On the Su-34's MFD, the FAB symbols began to flicker, like a signal that could no longer hold steady. The final UAV flew through dense interference that distorted image edges, but that same noise also concealed its true path. It pulled up into a tight arc, hugged the side of the EW vehicle, then slammed into the active antenna. A short blast, white smoke billowing upward, and the jamming dome, the wall Russia believed would shield it from UAVs, collapsed in sections like shattered glass. In the Russian command bunker, most alerts were smoothed out by automated systems. The map retained its false calm. Only on the Su-34's MFD did the FAB icons begin to drift. Delayed updates, dropouts, loss of fix, then slippage off the planned flight path. No one on the Russian side assembled the scattered signals into a complete picture. The UMPK guidance chain, believed impossible to penetrate within a 40-kilometer radius, was being severed segment by UAVs flying just above the ground. By the 24th second, all 3 UAV thrusts hit their targets. The Russian kill chain is split into 3 parts, and at that exact moment, the UMPK band in the sky began to change direction. At first subtly, then so rapidly that any cockpit intervention became purely procedural. From the 24th second onward, immediately after the kill chain was cut, the FAB-UMPK band on the Su-34's MFD ceased to be a stable curve and began to oscillate. Several bomb symbols slid tens of meters off the projected line. The automatic system attempted to correct using inertial data, but no ground updates remained to pull them back to the original trajectory. Inside the cockpit, the error stayed within limits. No one mentioned that at ranges of 40 to 50 kilometers, a small deviation on the screen was enough to push the impact point hundreds, even thousands of meters across the ground. In the Russian command bunker, the map continued to display the bomb stream striking Ukrainian trenches exactly as planned. Artillery officers waited for reports of softened ground to begin their fire missions. But on Ukrainian UAV feeds, the glide paths of many FABs had already bent westward, drifting into areas behind Russian lines, zones where artillery parks, supply depots, and maneuver routes had been consolidated for the Kupiansk breakthrough. At the forest edge in the rear, Russian infantry assembled along dirt roads. Ammunition trucks, recovery vehicles, and command trucks clustered in pre-selected clearings. The descending glide bomb roar echoed down, the sound usually tied to the opposing line about to be shattered. Some looked up at the white streaks overhead and realized they were not plunging deeper into Ukraine, but curving back over their own rear area. There was not enough time left for any dispersal order to fully take effect. The first FAB landed nearly a kilometer off the Ukrainian trench zone, slamming into open ground between an artillery park and a vehicle assembly area. The 500-kilogram warhead carved a deep crater, severing a maneuver route. The crater's rim hurled soil and debris across rows of nearby parked vehicles. On the map, the road linking rear and front snapped as if cleaved in two. The next bombs did not fall harmlessly into empty ground. One struck close to a field depot where artillery shells, fuel, and supplies had been concentrated for the operation. The blast tore off the depot roof and triggered a chain of smaller secondary explosions, enough to turn the area into a strip of chaos. MSTAS guns staged for firing positions were knocked askew or buried under dust. Some crews lost contact when antennas and command equipment were damaged. From above, Ukrainian UAVs recorded a stark contrast. Ukrainian trenches and artillery positions were largely untouched, the ground marked only by scattered churned soil, while the land behind Russian lines stood out with dense crater chains and scattered burn scars. In the Ukrainian operations bunker, the devastated zone was boxed in. It was rear territory that, in every prior Russian attack plan, had been marked as absolutely safe. Over the next few tens of seconds, the remaining FAB-500 UMPKs continued falling onto coordinates the system still treated as valid targets. A resupply vehicle park, a dirt crossroads used for artillery tractor turnarounds, a forest edge where a forward C2 station had gone dark after losing its guidance network. Each new crater was another joint torn loose from the attacking machine. When the clock on the Su-34 reached the 40-second mark, the last bombs had hit the ground. In the aircraft, the pilot saw only distant fire points on the horizon and heard a brief report stating that the targets had been struck. On the ground, anyone calm enough to study the force diagram could see the truth. Instead of opening a breakthrough toward Kupiansk, that morning's FAB-500 UMPK salvo had struck the very components Russia most needed intact to sustain its offensive tempo. As the blast dust slowly dissipated, Ukrainian reconnaissance UAVs held altitude at a few hundred meters, gliding behind Russian lines like a cold, unblinking eye. From above, the maneuver axis leading toward the front no longer appeared as a straight line. It had been cut into multiple disconnected segments, each one ending in a precisely placed 500-kilogram bomb crater. Wheeled vehicles halted, tracked vehicles split formation, and logistics convoys began diverting from routes that had been calculated down to the hour. The vehicle and artillery parks in the rear still retained firepower and ammunition, but their structure was gone. Command antennas snapped or dropped off the network within the same cycle. On paper, the force still existed. In reality, nothing remained to hold it in a common rhythm. A gun crew might be ready to fire, but without a unified targeting link, it became a static unit, waiting for data that would never arrive. At the forward field ammunition area, the damage did not come as a single explosion, but as a collapse of tempo. A distribution cycle that had run steadily for over an hour was stretched several times over. Some routes went completely empty. The kill chain was not weakened. It fell out of engagement conditions. Tracks still appeared sporadically, but there was no longer a pathway to transition them into fire allocation. After the initial strike, secondary effects spread cycle by cycle. Commanders were forced to disperse. Individual gun units began constructing their own partial pictures, making firing decisions late. Fire tempo dropped not because of ammunition shortages, but because there was no shared operational picture reliable enough to act on. On the front line, that gap became immediately visible. In the rear, once the primary maneuver axis was cut, convoys were forced to take longer, slower detours, leaving clear signatures under aerial reconnaissance. Rear areas, once considered safe, shifted state, no longer stable assembly zones, but high-risk terrain. At Kupiansk, technological advantage did not vanish due to symmetrical firepower. It was eroded by a strike that hit directly at the control rhythm. When that rhythm was lost, what remained were fragmented units, still armed, still crewed, but no longer part of a unified campaign. In the first few hours, there was a disruption. By the following day, every plan had to be rewritten from the beginning. The Kupiansk battle in this account closes on a stark paradox. The weapon Russia viewed as its breakthrough key, the FAB-500 UMPK, was not shot down, not intercepted in the air, but defeated at its own weakest point, the ground-based guidance network. Ukraine did not attempt to confront glide bombs head-on. It severed the controlling nerve, causing an attack chain once considered flawless to twist inward and crash into Russian rear areas like an act of self-inflicted punishment. After that moment, anyone still looking at the operational map around Kupiansk was left facing a chilling question. When warfare enters the era of low-cost UAVs and ground-hugging electronic warfare, how many optimized firepower structures can survive for more than a single minute in the air?